The shuttle docking log listed him as Envoy, Trade Division, Human Concord. No rank, no military title, no escort vessel following behind. Just one man and one bag. Ambassador Rin stood at the observation window of Vor Station and watched the small shuttle lock into the docking clamp. He had expected something more. A formal entry, armed guards and polished armor. Some show of importance. That was how every species arrived when they wanted to be taken seriously. Instead, a single human walked out of the docking tube. He was not tall by Lethkai standards. Medium height, wide through the shoulders, dark short hair, plain gray envoy clothes with a small human Concord crest on the chest. He carried his own bag, which he slung over one shoulder without any sign of effort. He looked around the docking bay once, then walked toward the station welcome desk at a slow, steady pace. Rin turned away from the window. "They sent a laborer," he said. His aide, Voss, stood behind him with arms folded. Voss was the largest of the Lethkai delegation. Broad, silver-scaled, with the kind of stillness that came from years of making other people nervous. He looked at the docking feed on the wall screen and said nothing. Rin moved to his chair and sat down. The room was his personal office on the station's upper ring, reserved for the senior diplomat of each delegation. Everything in it was clean and sharp. He had made sure of that before arrival. Presentation was the first language of power. "Pull his file," Rin said. The file came up on his desk screen. Darren Cole, age 34, born on Hadar, 3 Colony. Mine worker, 11 years. Trade certification, 6 years. No military background. No political family. He had passed the Concord Envoy exams 4 years ago and spent those 4 years negotiating small resource contracts in outer systems. Nothing important. Nothing that suggested he should be here, at Vor Station, negotiating a 30-year trade framework that would shape the economy of 3-star systems. Rin read it twice. Then he looked at Voss. "They're not taking this seriously," Voss said, "or they're very confident." Rin did not like that answer. He closed the file. Vor Station was neutral ground. That was the law. No weapons drawn, no threats made, no interference with other delegations. The Drathi who ran the station enforced those rules carefully. Commander Oral had a reputation for being fair and humorless in equal measure. But the law said nothing about environmental conditions. The station's gravity was set to 1.0 standard, which was comfortable for most species. The Lethkai preferred 0.8. Humans were built for 1.0. Rin had already spent 3 days before the humans' arrival having a quiet conversation with a member of the station's maintenance crew. A conversation that had included a generous payment in fuel credits. The maintenance crew member had access to the gravity control systems in the residential and common areas. Not the full station, not the command ring, but enough. Rin had not planned to use it immediately. He had wanted to watch the human first, size him up, see if there was any real weight behind the calm face in that file photo. But a laborer in plain gray clothes who carried his own bag. There was no reason to wait. That evening, Darren Cole moved into his assigned quarters on level 4. The room was standard envoy accommodation. A bed, a desk, a small window looking out at the star field. He set his bag down, placed a small framed photo on the desk, and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. On the corridor feed, Rin watched him. The human did not look around the room with suspicion. He did not check for listening devices. He simply sat, looked at the photo on the desk, and then lay back and closed his eyes. Rin tapped his screen. "Bring it to 1.3. The gravity in the residential ring shifted slowly over 20 minutes. Smooth enough that it would feel like nothing more than a heavy night. No alarms. No sudden change. Just a quiet, steady increase. On the feed, Darren Cole did not move. His breathing slowed. He was asleep. Rin watched for another 10 minutes. Nothing changed. The human slept like a man who had not been given anything to worry about. "Interesting," Voss said from the corner. Rin turned off the feed. "He is tired from travel. It means nothing. In the morning, push it to 1.6. He stood and straightened his formal coat. "By the time the opening reception begins, we will know exactly what kind of man the Concorde sent." He left the room without another word. Down on level 4, in a plain room with a small framed photo on the desk, Darren Cole slept without dreaming. The gravity pressed down on him at 1.3 standard, and he did not notice because the world he had grown up on pressed down harder than that, and he had spent 11 years underground where the pressure was heavier still. His body had learned a long time ago that the weight of a place was not a reason to stop moving. Outside the window, the dying star, the center of the system, burned slow and orange. War Station turned in its orbit, and somewhere in the upper ring, a Lethkai ambassador sat very still and thought about what it meant that a man could sleep so soundly in a room that should have been uncomfortable. He did not yet have the answer, but morning was coming. The first thing Vor Station's gravity log recorded at 0600 was a structural creak in the level 3 support beam. Small, the kind of sound a station makes when something is pressing it in a way it was not fully designed for. The second thing it recorded, for minutes later, was a medical alert from the Shun Trader quarters on level 4. One of them had tried to stand and had sat back down heavily, breathing hard. By 0630, the gravity in the residential ring was sitting at 1.6 standard. In the Lethkai observation room, Rin had been awake since before the change. He sat in front of his wall screen with a cup of warm liquid going cold beside him and watched the level 4 corridor feed. At 0641, a door opened. Darren Cole walked out. He was dressed and neat. Gray Envoy clothes, same as before. He held his data pad in his left hand. His pace was slower than it had been the night before. Rin could see that clearly. There was a deliberateness to each step, a kind of careful weight to the way he moved. But he was moving. Head up, shoulders back. Rin leaned forward slightly. The human walked to the end of the corridor, checked something on his data pad, and turned toward the station's common dining area. No hosetashin, no grabbing the wall for support. No sign that anything about this morning was unusual. Rin pulled back from the screen and sat very still. He had reviewed the file again at 0400. Hadar, 3 colony. The detail he had passed over the first time now sat in his thoughts like a stone in still water. Hadar, 3 was not a comfortable colony world. It was a mining settlement on a dense planet with a gravity of 1.8 standard. That was where Darren Cole had been born. That was where he had grown up. And for 11 years, he had worked in deep compression mines where the working gravity ran between 1.9 and 2.1 standard. For 11 years, this man had done physical labor at pressures that would have put most Lethkai in a medical chair. Rin stood slowly, feeling the pull of 1.6 in his own joints. His knees did not like it. His back was already tightening. He was younger than his senior years and considered himself fit by Lethkai standards. The human was having breakfast. He is not struggling, Voss said from the doorway. Voss was leaning against the frame, and even he looked heavier than usual. Voss, who could intimidate most species by standing still. He is slower, Rin said. Slower in walking, Voss replied. Not the same as struggling. Rin said nothing. He watched the feed switch to the common dining area. Darren Cole had taken a seat at the far table, set his data pad beside his tray, and was eating with the quiet focus of a man who had places to be. A Drathi crew member came in, moved toward the food station, and stumbled at the door. The human looked up. He stood, crossed the room at that same careful pace, and steadied the Drathi with one hand. Said something. The Drathi nodded, and they walked together to the food station. Then the human went back to his table and finished his meal. Rin turned off the screen. The opening reception was scheduled for midday. It was not a formal negotiation, just an introduction. Each delegation would present itself, exchange names and titles, and share a meal in the station's main hall. Simple enough, but it was the first moment all delegations would be in the same room. First impressions in that room carried weight for everything that followed. Rin arrived early, with Voss at his side and his 2 junior diplomats a step behind. The Drathi delegation was already present. Commander Oral stood near the wall, hands folded behind his back. The Shun traders came in looking pale and uncomfortable, moving slowly. The Vorkai observer, an elderly creature with 6 limbs, moved with careful deliberation, 2 of his limbs pressed against his side where they had clearly been injured by the gravity. Then Darren Cole walked in. He walked in the same way he had walked down the corridor. Steady, not fast, not labored. just present. He introduced himself to Commander Oral first, which was correct protocol. He shook the commander's hand, which was a human greeting gesture that Oral accepted with a small nod. Then he moved to the Shun traders and introduced himself with a small formal bow that showed he had studied their customs. When he reached Rin, he extended his hand in the human style. Rin took it. The grip was firm, not crushing, just solid. The kind of grip that belonged to hands that had spent years holding heavy things. Voss stepped slightly forward, and in a motion that could have been read as accidental, placed a hand on the human shoulder. Hard. The kind of contact meant to test. Darren Cole turned his head and looked at the hand. Then he looked at Voss. His face did not change. No anger, no fear, just a calm, level look that lasted exactly 2 seconds before he turned back to Rin and said, I have reviewed the initial trade proposals. I think we have more common ground than the files suggest. Voss quietly removed his hand. Rin smiled because it was expected of him. But behind the smile, he was already revising his plan. 1.6 had not been enough. The human had not just endured it. He had helped a crew member, eaten a full meal, arrived on time, and handled Voss without a word. Rin needed more. That night, he sat in front of his screen and typed a single number. 2.0. Then he sent the message to the maintenance crew and waited. It hit at 0300, not like a wave, like a blanket made of stone, settling slowly over the whole residential ring. The station did not announce it. There were no alarms. The gravity just climbed degree by degree until the number on a maintenance panel read 2.0 standard, and the man watching it nodded and went back to his card game. In the medical bay, the first call came at 0318. A Shin trader had fallen getting out of bed. His wrist was fractured clean through. The medic on duty logged it as an accidental injury and treated it, but she sent a note to Commander Oral's Q flag for morning review because this was the second Shin injury in 2 days, and that number bothered her. At 0340, the Vorkai observer's attendant made an emergency call. The elder could not rise from his sleeping mat. His lower 2 limbs had gone numb from the pressure. The medic came, and this time she sent the note to Oral's Q flagged urgent, not morning review. At 0412, a Drathi crew member was moving a supply crate through level 4 and simply sat down in the middle of the corridor. Not hurt, not unconscious, just done. He sat with his back against the wall and breathed for a while. At 0419, a door on level 4 opened. Darren Cole walked out. He was dressed. He moved down the corridor at a pace that could most honestly be described as grinding. Each step was short, deliberate, and completely intentional. His jaw was set. His eyes were forward. He reached the Drathi crew member sitting on the floor and stopped. He said something. The Drathi looked up and said something back. The crate beside him was roughly 60 standard kilos of SEAL nutrition packs. At 2.0 G, it weighed like a wall. Darren Cole picked it up, both hands. He carried it down the corridor and set it beside the door to the storage room. Then he came back and helped the Drathi to his feet and walked with him toward the medical bay without a word of complaint about where he had been going or what he had been doing. In the upper ring, Rin watched this on the feed and said nothing for a long time. Then Voss came into the room and stood behind him. 2 of the junior staff are in medical, Voss said. Turn has a sprained knee. Liz cannot keep food down from the pressure sickness. Rin kept his eyes on the screen. The human is in medical, Voss said. Rin straightened. He walked in, Voss added, with the Drathi. He is not a patient. He helped the Drathi to the desk and then left. On the screen, Rin watched the level 4 corridor where Darren Cole was now walking again, heading for the common dining area. Slower than yesterday. Every step landing with visible effort. But landing. The Lethkai's own people were in medical. The Shun had a fractured wrist. The Vorkai elder could not walk. The station itself was showing stress readings on the level 3 beam that were getting louder and harder to explain as routine. Rin had not thought about the station. He had thought about the human. The morning continued. At 0900, Darren Cole arrived at the pre-talks common room. He was the only non-Drathi, non-Lethkai person present, because everyone else was either in medical or had requested to remain in their quarters. He set his data pad on the table, poured himself water from the jug on the side counter, and began reviewing documents. At 0920, Commander Oral walked in. Oral was a tall drafty with 4 arms and a face that had learned a long time ago not to show surprise. He looked at the human, then at the empty chairs around the table, then sat across from Darren Cole. "You are the only envoy who made it to the common room this morning," Oral said. "I noticed that," Darren said, without looking up from his pad. Oral folded 2 of his arms. "Our structural monitors are showing unusual readings on levels 3 and 4. The gravity in the residential ring has been elevated above station standard. Significantly elevated." Darren looked up at that. "How significantly?" 2.0 standard, Oral said. "We are investigating the cause." Darren was quiet for a moment. He turned his water cup once in his hand. Then he said, "When you pull your maintenance logs, you should look at the access records for the gravity control panels on levels 3 through 6. Calibration errors usually show up as irregular spikes. A smooth, steady climb over time is something different." Oral looked at him. His expression did not change, but his upper 2 arms shifted slightly inward, which was a drafty sign that something had gotten his full attention. "That is a specific observation," Oral said. "I grew up on a high-gravity world," Darren said. "I know what accidental feels like, and I know what deliberate feels like. My knees know the difference." Oral stood. He looked at the human for a moment, the way you look at something that surprises you in a way you are not ready to name. "I will pull the logs," Oral said. "I know you will," Darren said, and turned back to his documents. Oral left. The gravity in the residential ring came down an hour later by emergency station override as Oral stood in the maintenance control room and read through an access log that was very clean, very deliberate, and very damning. He did not go to Rin immediately. He went back to his office and sat quietly, thinking about a human who had carried a 60-kilo crate at 2.0 G before dawn and told him exactly where to look. Then he called Rin's quarters. "Ambassador, my office. Now." The door to Commander Oral's office was thick enough that voices did not carry through it. But Rin's aide, standing in the corridor outside, could tell from the length of the meeting that it had not gone well. 40 minutes. No refreshments brought in. Rin came out walking fast, his expression flat and tight in the way of someone who had been given a choice they did not like. He passed Voss without a word and went straight to his private quarters. Inside, he sat down and pressed his hands flat on the desk and thought. Oral had the maintenance logs. The logs showed every access point, every timestamp, every gravity setting change, smooth and deliberate and unnatural. The maintenance crew member who had accepted the fuel credit payment was now on the wrong side of a station inquiry and had already given a statement to protect himself. Rin could offer explanations. He could call it a miscalibration authorized for delegation comfort. He could challenge the maintenance worker's account. He could delay and argue and make the legal process slow. But he could not make the logs disappear. Oral had told him clearly, under Concord law, unauthorized adjustment of life support systems, gravity included, was a criminal matter. 2 species had been physically injured. The Vorkai elder was still in medical. The charges that could follow Rin home from the station would end a career and possibly begin a trial. He had one move left. The formal opening of negotiations was the next morning. Rin could not cancel his own attendance without confirming guilt. He had to be in that room. And if he was in that room, then so was the human. If the human reacted with violence, if Rin could provoke him into striking first, in front of witnesses from 3 species, the talks would collapse. The human delegation would be disgraced. Rin's own conduct would be secondary to the incident, buried in diplomatic confusion. It would not save him entirely, but it would muddy the water enough to matter. He looked at Voss. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "make it look like an accident." Voss nodded once. The negotiations room was a wide, neutral space with a long oval table at its center. No weapons. No recording unless both parties agreed. Natural lighting panels set to low warmth. Commander Oral stood at the head of the table as the delegations filed in. Rin arrived with his full delegation. The junior diplomats, Turn and Liss, were still moving carefully after their time in medical. Voss moved like nothing had happened to him at all, because nothing had. Darren Cole arrived alone, as always. He set his data pad on the table, 2 seats from the corner. Sat down, placed his hands flat. Oral announced the opening of formal negotiations. He said the framework, the terms, the purpose. Standard language. Darren was watching Oral. Rin was watching Darren. Voss moved around the edge of the table toward the water station. It happened quickly and looked entirely natural. Voss stepped past the back of Darren's chair, and his arm came out. Not a swing, not a shove, just a solid, angled contact against Darren's forearm. Hard enough to bruise. Hard enough that the data pad skidded off the table and clattered to the floor. Every head in the room turned. Voss stepped back with his hands up in a gesture of exaggerated apology. The room was silent. The Drathy staff at the side wall had gone still. The Shun traders were watching. Oral had stopped speaking mid-sentence. Everyone looked at the human. Darren Cole looked at his data pad on the floor. He looked at Voss. Then he looked at Rin. The look lasted perhaps 3 seconds. It was not angry. It was not afraid. It was the look of someone who had just confirmed something they already knew. He bent down, picked up the data pad, checked the screen, and set it back on the table. Then he looked at Oral and said, I have a full proposal ready for the resource exchange framework. If it suits the commander, I would like to begin with the food credit side of the structure, since the Lethkai colony needs are time-sensitive. Oral stared at him for a moment. Then he said, Proceed. Behind Darren, Oral's assistant quietly opened a new log entry on her tablet. She typed 3 words, deliberate physical contact. Then she looked at Voss, and she typed his name. Rin sat at the table with his hands folded and said nothing. Darren Cole spent the next hour laying out a trade proposal that was detailed, fair, and clearly built by someone who had done serious work before arriving. The Lethkai colony's medical import needs. The human Concord's demand for rare core metals. Matching supply cycles. Shared shipping routes. Numbers that worked. Rin barely heard it. He was watching the door to his future close, one quiet word at a time. That evening, something slid under Darren's door. A small data chip. No note. No sender. He picked it up, turned it in his fingers, and sat down at his desk. He pressed it into his pad reader. The file that opened contained every internal communication from the Lethkai delegation for the past 12 days. Every order, every payment, every gravity setting, every plan. Darren read through it slowly once. Then he set the pad face down on the desk and looked at the small framed photo that sat beside it. He sat like that for a while. Then he reached for his data pad and typed a request for a private meeting. One attendee from each side. No odds. No recordings. He sent it to Rin's quarters. Rin almost did not come. He read the meeting request 3 times. No odds. No recordings. A private room. He had every reason to refuse. He was already in a bad position, and meeting the human alone gave him no protection and no witnesses. But the request had said one line at the bottom. Bring nothing. I have everything already. He came. The small meeting room off the main corridor had 2 chairs and a table. Nothing else. Darren Cole was already there when Rin arrived. The human sat with his hands resting on the table, relaxed. No tablet. No documents. No data chip visible anywhere. Rin sat across from him. Between them, Darren placed the data chip on the table. He set it down gently and then moved his hand away. He did not touch it again. Rin looked at it. He knew what it was. He had 1 or 2 guesses about where it had come from, and those guesses would keep him awake later. But right now, he sat very still and waited. I have read all of it, Darren said. Every message, every payment, every number. He paused. You planned this before I even arrived. You decided I was not worth taking seriously before you saw me walk off the shuttle. Rin said nothing. That is fine, Darren said. You were not entirely wrong. I'm not a senior diplomat. I'm not a military figure. I have no political family in the Concord. I'm a man who grew up in a mine and passed some exams and turned out to be good at reading what people actually need versus what they say they need. He looked at Rin steadily. That is what I am. Rin kept his eyes on the table. I can take this chip to Commander Oral tomorrow morning, Darren said. Added to what he already has from the maintenance logs, you will be formally charged under Concord law before the end of the week. Your career ends here. There may be a trial. Your junior staff will have to give statements. Your colony's trade needs will go unrepresented for however long that process takes, which could be years. Rin felt the weight of that land. Or, Darren said, here is the other option. He leaned back slightly in his chair. You step back from lead negotiator. You cite health reasons. That is true. 2.0G did affect you, and your file will show it. Your junior diplomat, Sarah, takes the lead. She is prepared. I have read how she writes, and she knows the material. He glanced at the chip. This stays with me. It does not go to oral. It does not go to anyone. The Lefkai delegation continues. The talks continue. Your colony gets the medical imports and food credits they need. My people get the rare core metals. The agreement gets signed and holds for 30 years. Silence. You could still file charges against me, Rin said. His voice was flat, not pleading, just stating. I could, Darren said. But your colony's medical imports are late by 8 months already. I looked at the supply data. You have children on 3 settlements whose treatment schedules have been delayed. Filing charges means more delays. Being right does not fix that. Rin looked at him for the first time since sitting down. Really looked. Why are you doing this? He asked. Darren was quiet for a moment. He turned his water cup once on the table with one finger, a slow circle. Then he said, on Hadar 3, where I grew up, the mines ran deep. When a section collapsed, it did not matter what company you worked for or who owed whom money. You dug together or nobody got out. He stopped turning the cup. I'm not interested in being the man who won. I'm interested in the agreement that works. Those are different things. Rin sat with that for a long time. He was not a sentimental man. He had built his career on leverage and position and the art of making other people smaller. He did not fully understand the person sitting across from him. He suspected he never would, but he understood the offer. Sarah takes the lead, he said quietly. Yes. And Voss. Off the station. Medical transfer will do. Oral is already writing the incident report on yesterday's contact. A voluntary transfer keeps it from becoming something larger. Rin nodded slowly. He looked at the chip on the table one more time. Then he stood. The Lefkai people are not your enemy, he said. It came out smaller than he intended. I know that, Darren said. That is why we're talking instead of filing. Rin left. Darren sat alone in the room for a while. He picked up the data chip and held it. Then he put it in his chest pocket, stood up, and turned off the room light. In the corridor, he passed 2 of the Lefkai junior staff heading toward the dining hall. One of them, a young woman with careful eyes and a data pad held close to her chest, glanced at him as he passed. Her name was Sarah. He gave her a small nod. She returned it and kept walking. 4 days later, the agreement was signed. It happened quietly, as these things do when they go right. Sarah sat across from Darren at the oval table, and they worked through the final framework the same way they had worked through every section, methodically, without theatrics, with a lot of looking at numbers and a willingness on both sides to ask questions that did not have comfortable answers. The rare core metal quotas, the food credit schedule, the medical import routing through 3 waypoints that shaved 6 weeks off delivery time, the pricing adjustments that would hold for 5 years before review, 30 years of structure, all of it hammered out in 4 days. When Sarah signed her name at the bottom of the document, she did it with a steady hand and a straight back. She was young for a lead diplomat. She knew that. She had felt Rin watching her from his quarters, felt the weight of how she had gotten this seat. But she had prepared for this negotiation for 2 years, and she had done the work, and the name on the document was hers. Commander Oral witnessed it. He pressed his station seal to the bottom and did not make a speech because he was not a speech-making person. Darren Cole signed for the Human Concord. He signed the way he did most things, without ceremony. Afterward, when the Drathy staff had rolled up the documents and the room was nearly empty, Sarah came to stand beside him at the side counter while they both poured the last of the water. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. How did you know the gravity was being raised on purpose?" "From the very first night." Darren considered this. The rate of increase was too smooth. When calibration systems drift, they spike. They fluctuate. This moved in one direction at one steady pace. That is not a machine with a problem. That is a hand on a dial. Sera no dead slowly. And you did not report it right away. I wanted to see how far he would go, Darren said. And I wanted Oral to find it himself. Evidence that walks in on its own feet is harder to argue within a complaint from the person being targeted. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the harder question. Were you afraid? At 2.0, Darren set down his cup. He thought about that honestly, the way the question deserved. My knees were hurting by day 2, he said. My lower back was not happy with me. At 2.0, I was not comfortable. I was functional. There is a difference. He paused. I was angry, if I'm being honest. Not at the discomfort, at the assumption behind it. Someone decided that pressing down on me would make me smaller. He looked out the wide panel window at the stars. It has never worked that way for me. Sarah looked at him for a moment. She seemed to want to say something else. Instead, she said, "Thank you for the framework. My people need it." "I know," Darren said. "That is why I came." He left the station the next morning. Same bag, same quiet. Commander Oral met him at the docking tube. Not officially, just standing there, hand behind his back, as Darren walked past with his bag over his shoulder. "The Vorkai Elder is recovering," Oral said. "He'll be fine." "Good," Darren said. "The maintenance crew member has been suspended pending formal review." Oral paused. "Ambassador Rin departed last night. Medical leave." Darren nodded. Oral looked at him for a long moment. The Drathi commander had seen a great many people come through Vor Station over his career. Traitors, generals, politicians, spies who pretended to be traitors. He had learned to read arrivals and departures the way other people read maps. He said, if the Concord ever needs someone to send to a difficult room, they know who to send. Darren smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that did not need any help from the rest of his face. "They always send me to the difficult rooms," he said. "I did not mind them." He walked into the docking tube. His shuttle was small, the same one he had arrived in. He stowed his bag, settled into the pilot's seat, and ran the pre-flight check. The station fell away behind him as he cleared the docking clamp. The dying orange star at the center of the system hung ahead and to the left, slow and enormous, and unconcerned with anything that happened in its orbit. The comms panel lit up. "Concord Command, right on schedule. Envoy Cole, report." Darren looked out the viewport for a moment. The station was already small behind him. Somewhere inside it, a 30-year trade framework was being copied and sealed and sent to 3 governments. Children on Lethkai colony settlements would get their medical shipments in 6 weeks instead of months. Mining teams in the human Concord's outer zones would have rare core contracts locked for a generation. He pressed the comms button. Agreement signed. 30-year framework. Ready for next post. A pause on the other end. "Any complications?" Darren watched the stars. "Nothing I could not walk through," he said. He closed the channel and pointed the shuttle toward home.